The day after we buried my father, my mother and my sister cornered me in a parking lot and told me to share fairly. He'd left me everything. $7.3 million and his company. Not Ashley. Not the golden child. Me. The one my mother spent my whole childhood calling her second-class daughter. They expected me to fold, the way I always had. My mother dabbed her eyes. My sister said it wasn't right. I didn't argue. I just smiled and said, "Of course. Let me read Dad's letter first." They had no idea what was in that letter. They had no idea what he'd kept all those years. They should have let me stay second class. My name is Hannah Gaither. I'm 34 years old. Before I go on, if this already put a knot in your chest, take a second to like and subscribe. It helps this story find the people who need it. And tell me where you're listening from, and your local time. I read everyone. This is the story of the father I was raised to believe gave up on me, and the envelope that proved it was a lie. Let me take you back to the week we buried him. The funeral was on a Tuesday. Cold for October in Virginia, the kind of gray that gets into your hands and stays. I sat in the fourth row. Not the front. No one told me to sit there. I did it on my own, out of a habit 20 years deep. The way you learn to take the smaller chair when you grow up being told the bigger one was never meant for you. My mother sat in front, in black that fit too well to have been bought that week. My sister Ashley sat beside her, a hand on our mother's arm. People came up the aisle in a slow line, and my mother received them the way a queen receives her court, grieving in a way that made everyone feel they should comfort her first. A woman from the church squeezed my shoulder on her way past. "You came," she said. "I remember that. You came." Like it was a surprise, like a daughter at her own father's funeral was something worth noting. "I came," I said. The service was about a man I didn't recognize. The pastor talked about Thomas Gaither, the businessman, the provider, the family man. He talked about a company my father built from one truck and a phone line into something with 90 employees behind it. He talked about a man who loved his daughters. Daughters. Plural. I sat in the fourth row and listened to a stranger describe a father I'd been told my whole life didn't want me, because that was the story. It was always simple. My parents divorced when I was 5. My father left. He didn't pay. He didn't call. He didn't care. My mother raised 2 girls alone and bitter, and she made very sure I knew which of the 2 had cost her more. Afterward, there was a receiving line in the church hall. Coffee in paper cups. Grocery store cookies still in their plastic. My mother stood at the center of it, working the room like she'd planned the seating. "He'd want us all together today," she said, loud enough to carry. Family was everything to Thomas. The word together landed wrong. I didn't know why yet. I would. Ashley found me by the coffee. My sister is 3 years older than me, sells real estate now, and has spent every one of those years certain the world owed her the better seat. She talks in the bright, closing voice even at a funeral. "You holding up?" "I'm fine. Mom's a wreck." She glanced back at our mother, who did not look like a wreck. "We should talk. After. About everything." "About what?" "You know. The estate. Dad's stuff." She touched my arm. Light. Practiced. "We'll figure it out as a family." There it was again. As a family. I should have heard the engine turning over under those 2 words. I didn't. Not fully. I was tired and sad in the confused way you can only be sad about someone you were never allowed to know. The parking lot is where it actually happened. I was walking to my car. My mother and Ashley caught me between a minivan and the hedge, the 2 of them moving in step, like they'd rehearsed it. I believe now that they had. "Hannah, honey," the funeral voice. "We need to talk about the arrangements." "What arrangements?" "Your father's estate." Her eyes were dry now. The church was behind us. No one left to perform for but me. "He left things Lopsided. We think he wasn't himself at the end. Lopsided how? Ashley couldn't wait. He left all of it to you. The money, the company, everything. She said it like a charge being read. $7.3 million. That's not right. That's not fair to Mom. She was his wife. For 4 years, I said. 30 years ago. That is not the point. My mother's mouth went thin and white. I raised you girls alone while he did exactly as he pleased, and now he reaches up out of the grave to humiliate me, handing it all to you? She let the wound spread across her face. We're family. Family shares. You'll split it fairly. 3 equal parts. It's what he'd have wanted, if he'd been in his right mind. I looked at them. My mother, who had told me for 18 years that my father abandoned us. My sister, who had never shared a thing in her life. A man I didn't know was crossing the lot toward us. Older. A careful gray suit. A folder under one arm. Mrs. Geither, he said to my mother. Then to me, Hannah, David Reyes. I was your father's attorney. He held out a sealed envelope. Cream-colored, heavy. My name on the front in handwriting I hadn't seen in 20 years. He asked me to give you this, privately. My mother's hand twitched toward it. Reyes didn't move. I took it. It was heavier than paper should be. There's a formal reading of the will next month, he said. All beneficiaries will be notified. He nodded once and walked to his car. My mother turned to me, and every trace of grief was gone. Whatever's in that letter, she said, it doesn't change what's fair. I held the envelope to my chest. I thought about every smaller chair I'd ever taken without a word. Of course, I said. Let me read Dad's letter first. To understand why that envelope mattered, you have to understand what it was to be the second daughter in my mother's house. I'll start with the cakes. Every birthday, my mother made Ashley a cake from scratch. 3 layers, real buttercream, a different theme each year. A castle one year, a horse the next, a sweet 16 with a fondant tiara she worked on past midnight. There are photographs of her in the kitchen at 1 in the morning, piping roses, her tongue between her teeth. For my birthdays, there was a cake from the grocery store, the kind in the plastic clamshell, the gel writing already done at the factory. Happy birthday in blue. Not even my name, just the words that came on it. I didn't think it was cruel when I was small. Children don't have a word for it. You just learn the shape of your place, and you fold yourself into it. Ashley's place was the center of the table. Mine was wherever there happened to be room. Money was the constant lesson. There was never enough. That was the refrain. Repeated so often, it stopped being a complaint and became weather. We were poor, my mother said, because my father had left us with nothing. I grew up inside that sentence the way you grow up inside a climate, but the money that didn't exist always existed for Ashley. Ashley got braces. I had a gap in my front teeth until I was 23 and paid to fix it myself. Ashley did pageants, the entry fees, the gowns, a coach who came on Saturdays. I sat in the audience and clapped. Ashley got a used car at 16, a little blue Honda my mother called a necessity for her schedule. When I turned 16, I got a bus pass and a speech about gratitude. Ashley needs it more, my mother said. About everything. New shoes? The class trip to Washington I didn't go on. The dentist. Ashley needs it more, Hannah. You're the tough one. You'll be fine. I remember the class trip clearly because I'd saved for it. 8th grade. The fee was $140 and I'd put away $90 from bagging groceries, and I asked my mother for the rest at the kitchen table on a Sunday. She didn't even look up from her coffee. We don't have it this month, honey. I have most of it. I just need 50. And what about your sister's recital dress? That's 120. Should I tell Ashley she can't have it so you can ride a bus to look at statues? She finally looked at me then, and her face had the patient disappointment she saved for my wanting things. "You're old enough to understand how this works." I understood. I gave my $90 toward Ashley's dress that week. I told myself it was the grown-up thing to do. I was 13. So I made myself tough, because tough was the only role left open. I got my first job at 15, bagging groceries at the same store that made my birthday cakes. I still remember the name tag. Hannah, in white letters on red. I bought my own school clothes with that paycheck. I bought my own prom dress off the clearance rack, 2 sizes wrong, and took it in myself on my grandmother's old machine. I learned the fastest way to get a thing was to stop asking for it and start earning it. I'm not telling you this for pity. I'm telling you because it's the soil everything else grew in. You need to know how deep the roots went. And running through all of it, like a single thread stitched through every year, was the story of my father. My mother told it constantly. She told it to me, to the neighbors, to my teachers at the conferences I attended alone because she couldn't get off work for the second one. That was always how she put it. The second one. Ashley's conference she made. Mine I walked to, sat in a child-sized chair across from a teacher who clearly felt sorry for me, and signed my own forms in a careful 12-year-old hand. Thomas Gaither left when Hannah was 5. He didn't want the responsibility. He stopped paying. He never called. He started a new life and forgot he'd had children at all. "Your father," she would say, settling it like a stone on a grave, "is the reason we have nothing." She said it with such certainty, such well-worn grief. It never once occurred to me to doubt her, because what child doubts the only parent standing in the room? There was a custodial account. I want you to hold on to this part. I knew it existed because my mother mentioned it when it made her look good, at a cousin's graduation party, to another mother in a church pew. "There's money set aside for Hannah's college," she'd say, warm as summer. "Her father's required to contribute something at least." She'd smile like the admission cost her. So I grew up believing there was at least that. A college account. Something with my name on it, waiting for me to turn 18. I was 16 the night I heard the phone call. It was late. I was supposed to be asleep. My mother was on the kitchen phone, and her voice had dropped into the low, hard register it only used when no one was being performed for. "No," she said. "Absolutely not. You don't get to decide that now." A pause. I stood at the top of the stairs in the dark, my heart going fast for a reason I couldn't name. "She doesn't want to see you. Neither of them do. You made your choice, Thomas." Another pause, longer. "Send whatever you want. It changes nothing. You abandoned us. Live with it." She hung up. I went back to bed and told myself it was about something else, the way you do at 16 when the truth is too big to hold. The next morning she was making Ashley pancakes, and the night dissolved into all the other nights. "You abandoned us. Live with it." I believed it for 18 years. I built my entire father out of that one sentence. He abandoned us. He didn't pay. He didn't care. I carried that man around inside me like a stone, and I hated him in the cheap, easy way you can only hate someone you were never once allowed to meet. That was the lie. I just didn't know yet how many layers it had, or how far down they went. The divorce, as I understood it then, was clean and one-sided. My father wanted out. My mother got custody. He drove off into a new life, and that was the end of the family. That was the shape of it in my head, and I never thought to question the shape. Let me tell you the version I could actually see as a child, and how every piece of it had been quietly arranged. The visits simply stopped. When I was very small, there were fragments. A memory of a workshop that smelled like motor oil and cut metal, a man's rough hands closing mine around a wrench, showing me how it caught the bolt and turned. I couldn't have been more than 4. Then nothing. I was told he stopped coming. I was told he lost interest in us. By the time I was 8, my father was a closed door at the end of a hall, and a story my mother told to explain why we went without. I didn't fight it. There was no one to fight. You can't argue with an absence. Then there was the account. I've told you my mother mentioned it when it flattered her. What I didn't know was how much I'd built on those offhand mentions. A college fund. Money with my name on it. The one thing in my childhood that was supposed to be mine and only mine, sitting somewhere safe, growing, waiting for me to be old enough to need it. I turned 18 in March of my senior year. I'd already been accepted into the nursing program at the community college. The cheap path. The practical one. The one you choose when you've spent your whole life being told there's never enough. I found an old statement in a kitchen drawer, copied the account number onto the back of my hand, and drove to the bank with my brand new license. The teller typed. Frowned. Typed again. She turned the monitor a few degrees away from me, the way they do. I'm sorry, she said. That account's closed. Closed? It's my college fund. There's supposed to be money in it. I can't pull the history on a closed account from this terminal. She wouldn't meet my eyes. You'd need to speak with the account holder. I'm the account holder. It has my name on it. The custodial account holder, she said, gentle, like she'd had this conversation before. The adult who managed it for you. That would be a parent. I drove home with the number still on the back of my hand. I asked my mother in the kitchen. I can still see the flicker that crossed her face before the performance locked into place. That half-second of calculation she never quite managed to hide. Oh, honey. She set down her mug. There was never as much in there as your father liked to pretend. It got eaten up. Bills, groceries, keeping a roof over your heads. Do you have the faintest idea what it cost to raise 2 girls with no help from him? And I believed that too. Of course I did. We were poor. We'd always been poor. Of course the account was empty. Everything in my life had taught me that money meant for me had a way of dissolving before it reached me. So I took out loans. I want you to understand what that meant. In numbers. Because the numbers come back later. $31,000 over 4 years, at interest, to become a nurse. I signed the first promissory note at 18 at a folding table during orientation, and I remember thinking the figure looked like a phone number, not a debt. I worked 30 hours a week through nursing school, nights and weekends, and I finished my degree at 22. I went straight into an emergency room and I was good at it. Calm when the monitors screamed, steady hands, the ability to keep my voice level while a stranger's worst day came apart in front of me. I built an entire life and I did it alone, with no help from anyone, and I told myself that made me strong. I asked my mother about the account one more time, 2 years later, when a loan bill came that I couldn't cover that month. I was 20. I asked carefully, the way you approach an animal that bites. That money, I said. From Dad. Was there really none of it left? Even a little? She looked at me over the top of her reading glasses. Why are you digging this up? It's done. It's gone. A beat. Honestly, Hannah, after everything I sacrificed, the fact that you'd accuse me, I'm not accusing you of anything. It certainly sounds like it. And that was the end of it. She had a way of turning a question into my cruelty, so that I ended up apologizing for having asked. And here's the part I'm least proud of. I stopped asking why. I stopped asking why my father left, why he never paid, why the account was empty. I packed all of it into the stone I carried and I just kept walking, because asking why had never once gotten me an answer that helped. I told myself I'd made my peace with it. I hadn't. You can't make peace with a lie. You can only carry it and call the weight something else. I read the letter that night, alone, at my own kitchen table. I'd carried it around the whole long day. It sat in my bag through the drive home, through the dinner I reheated and didn't eat. I poured a glass of wine I also didn't drink. Then I slid my thumb under the flap and opened it. 3 pages. Blue ink. His handwriting was small and square, the careful hand of a man who'd filled out work orders by the thousand. The date at the top was from the spring. Months before he died. He'd written it knowing. I'm going to tell you what it said. But I won't pretend I read it the way you read an ordinary letter. I read the first line and had to stop and set the page down. I read it again. Then I read the whole thing 4 times. And somewhere in there, the kitchen went cold. Hannah, it began, if David has given you this, then I'm gone. And there are things I should have said to your face years ago. I was a coward not to. Let me try to say them now. You were never second to me. Not once. Not for a single day of your life. I sat there and read that one sentence until the words came apart, and then slowly went back together, meaning something I'd never been allowed to believe. He wrote about the divorce. He'd left the marriage, yes. He wrote that he and my mother could not share a house without doing damage to everyone in it, but that he had never, not for one moment, meant to leave me. He wrote that he had fought for time with me, and that every door he tried had been closed in his face. I came to your games, he wrote. I sat in the parking lot because I wasn't allowed any closer. I watched you pitch in the 8th grade. I watched you walk at your high school graduation from the back row of the lot, and I cried in the truck like a fool. I have 100 memories of you that you don't know I have. Then the line that turned everything to ice. I paid, every month, on time, for 13 years, until the day you turned 18. I never missed once. I have the records. David has the records. I stopped there for a long time, because I had a memory, one I'd filed under nothing, for years. I was maybe 10. The mailman had handed me an envelope addressed to my mother, and I'd seen, before she snatched it from my hand, the return address. Gaither Mechanical, my father's company. I'd asked her what it was. Junk, she'd said, and torn it in half in front of me. I hadn't thought about that envelope in 20 years. Now I knew what was inside it. A check. One of 156 he never missed. And then, lower on the page, careful, deliberate. There was an account for your education. I funded it for years, separate from the support. When you turned 18, it should have held enough for school and more. I learned, far too late, that it had been emptied. I'm not going to write here what I believe happened, because I don't want to hand you my anger. I want you to see the documents with your own eyes and decide for yourself what you believe. Ask David about the account. Tell him I said to show you everything, hold nothing back. The last page was softer. He wrote that he was proud of me, that he'd followed my life from a distance he hated every day of, that he knew I'd become a nurse, and that it had made sense to him, because I'd always been the one who stayed calm when things broke. He wrote that he'd left me the company not as a burden, but as a trust. That of everyone in his life, I was the one he believed would do right by the people who worked there. I'm sorry I let a lie stand for so long, he wrote. I thought protecting you from the fight was the same as protecting you. I was wrong, and you paid for it. The truth is, in the records, and the records are with David. There's also a box at your Aunt Catherine's. She'll understand. She always understood, even when I didn't. He signed it. Your father, who never once thought of you as second. Tom. I put the pages down flat on the table and pressed my hand over them, the way you'd hold something down in a wind. I didn't sob. It came out flatter than that, a ringing disbelief that makes your ears feel full. 20 years of a story handed to me as fact. And here was the man himself, reaching out from the far side of death, taking it apart line by line. He came to my games. He sat in the parking lot. He paid every month. The account should have been full, and I had hated him for all of it. That was the part I couldn't put down. For 20 years, I'd let myself hate a man who'd been sitting across the street watching me play, because hating him was easier than asking why the only parent I had kept tearing his envelopes in half. The grief came for that. Not for him, exactly. For the version of me who'd believed her so completely. Ask David. Ask about the box. Before I tell you what was in that account, what do you think my mother did with 18 years of my father's money? Go ahead. Comment your guess. Most people land close. Almost no one lands close enough. I called David Reyes the next morning. He had me in his office by Thursday. Reyes and Holloway was 2 careful rooms above a downtown bank. David Reyes was somewhere near 60, dry as a ledger, the kind of lawyer who weighs each word like he's billing for it by the ounce. There was a file already squared on the table when I came in. Thick, color-tabbed. Your father was a meticulous man, he said, gesturing me to a chair. He kept everything. And he asked me, more than once, to make certain you saw all of it. So. He turned the file to face me. We'll start with the will, then the account, since I suspect that's what the letter sent you in here about. The will first. He read me the parts that mattered. My father had updated it in the spring after the diagnosis with full capacity. Reyes paused to say that plainly, and to note there was a letter from the treating physician in the file confirming it. The estate, valued at roughly $7.3 million, including the business, came to me. There were 2 small specific bequests, $25,000 to my mother, $25,000 to Ashley. And there's a clause, Reyes said. He turned a page and set his finger on it. A no-contest clause. In terrorem, the books call it. In plain English. Any beneficiary who challenges this will in court, without probable cause, forfeits whatever they were left. He looked at me over his glasses. Your father was very specific that it be included. He told me, and I wrote it down because it stayed with me. They'll come after her. Make sure it costs them. I sat with that for a moment. All right, I said. The account. He opened the second section. Certified bank statements. The bank's stamp in the corner of each page. The custodial account. A UTMA, he explained. A custodial account a parent opens and manages on behalf of a minor child. Opened the year I was 5. The year of the divorce. Your father funded this regularly, Reyes said. He laid the statements out across the table, year by year, left to right. The deposits marched down the columns. Steady. A man setting money aside for a child's future, month after month, year after year, for over a decade. This is entirely separate from the child support, which he also paid in full. We have those canceled checks as well. He set down a second stack, canceled support checks. Each one cleared. Each one stamped on the back. Each one deposited into my mother's account. I picked one up. His signature. The amount. A date from when I was 7. He didn't miss a payment in 13 years, Reyes said. I've handled a great many of these files in my career. I have never once seen a cleaner record. So that was the first wall coming down. My father didn't abandon us. My father paid. I'd carried the opposite as fact for 2 decades. And here it was, stamped and certified, the exact reverse. I waited to feel relief. What came instead was the floor tilting, because if that was a lie, I already knew the next question. And I already half knew the answer. Now here's the same account, Reyes said quietly. But look at the other column. The deposits went in, and the withdrawals came out. Not for me, not tuition, not braces, not a blue Honda. The withdrawals were transfers, money moving out of my custodial account and into another account entirely. This receiving account, Reyes said, tapping the routing line, is in your mother's name, her personal account. Not a household account, not anything held jointly with you, hers. Year after year. Money my father set aside for my education, lifted out of my name and dropped into my mother's, in amounts both large and small, until the account ran dry right around the month I turned 18 and walked into that bank with the number on my hand. How much? I said. In total. Reyes turned to a summary sheet he'd prepared himself, a single page, a single figure underlined at the bottom. Over the life of the account, including the growth it would have earned, he said, she removed a little over $300,000 that was legally yours. 18 years. All of it. $300,000. While I bagged groceries to buy my own school clothes. While I signed a promissory note that looked like a phone number. While she told me, again and again, that we had nothing, and that my father was the reason. So I can sue her, I said. For that. Reyes set his pen down, which I'd learn was his way of telling me to listen carefully. You could try. I'd advise against it. He folded his hands. A custodial parent who drains a minor's account commits a clear breach. Conversion. Breach of fiduciary duty. The trouble is time. The clock on a claim like that started running when you turned 18, or close to it. 16 years ago. He let that sit. A judge would almost certainly throw it out as time-barred before we got near the merits. Suing her would cost you money and hand her the word vindicated. Then what was the point of him keeping all this? The point, Reyes said, and he touched the file the way you'd touch something you respected, is that he wasn't building a lawsuit. He was building a record. So that when they came for the estate, and he was certain they would, the truth would be sitting on the table, certified, the moment anyone claimed he'd abandoned anyone. He almost smiled. He wasn't planning to attack. He was setting a trap, and waiting for them to walk into it. I looked at the statements for a long time. The numbers didn't move. They never do. Then I saw something I almost missed. 2 of the transfers, late ones from when I was 16 and 17, didn't go to my mother's account at all. They went somewhere with a different name on the memo line. I put my finger on it. What's that one? Reyes leaned in, checked it against the key. His mouth tightened, just slightly, the first crack I'd seen in him all morning. That account, he said, belonged to your sister. To Ashley. My Aunt Catherine lives 40 minutes north, in the same small brick house she's had for 30 years. My father's younger sister. Growing up, I barely knew her. Another door my mother had quietly pulled shut. Catherine and Diane didn't get along, I'd been told, which I now understood was its own kind of evidence. She opened the door before I could knock. She'd been crying, but she steadied herself, put a hand flat against my cheek, and just looked at me. You look like him, she said. You always did. That's half of why she couldn't bear to look at you straight. She'd made coffee. We sat at her kitchen table, and on the table between us was a shoebox, the lid already off, waiting. Tom called me before he died, Catherine said. Told me he was finally writing to you. He said you'd come once you'd read it. He asked me to keep this until you did. The box was full of letters. They were addressed to me. Years of them. The same square blue handwriting I'd read at my own table 2 nights before. Birthday cards, long folded letters, a card that said, Happy graduation with a check still tucked inside, never cashed, the ink gone soft at the fold. And across every single envelope, in my mother's handwriting, in heavy ballpoint pressed hard enough to dent the paper. Return to sender. No such person here. Do not contact. I want to tell you I held it together. I didn't. Not for that. He wrote to you for years, Catherine said, her voice low and even, like she'd practiced keeping it that way. She sent everyone back. After a while, the post office just did it automatically. Once a household refuses mail like that, the carrier stops trying. He kept writing anyway. He'd mail one. It'd come back weeks later with her handwriting on it, and he'd put it in this box. He gave the box to me about 5 years ago. He said he couldn't keep it in his own house anymore. It hurt too much to walk past. I picked up one envelope. My name in his hand. Return to sender slashed across it in hers, the pen nearly tearing through. "The visits," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "She told me he stopped coming, that he lost interest." Catherine shook her head, slow. "He came. Lord, he came. When you were little, he'd drive 2 hours each way for a single weekend, and she'd have a reason it couldn't happen. You were sick. You had a thing. You'd said you didn't want to. She turned him away at the door more than once with you standing right behind her in the hall. She wrapped both hands around her mug. He took her to court over it, the one time. It got ugly. She told the judge things about him that weren't true. That he drank. That he frightened you. None of it was so. But it was her word against his. And she was the mother. And after that he was terrified that if he pushed any harder, she'd turn you against him for good. So he stopped pushing. He decided a father in the parking lot was better than no father at all." "The parking lot," I said. Her eyes filled. "He came to your games, Hannah. Everyone he could get to. He parked across the street so you wouldn't spot him and feel torn in two. He'd watch you play, and then he'd drive home alone. He saw your graduation from the back of the lot." She got up, went to a drawer, and came back with something. "He had this. I want you to have it now." A photograph. My father, younger, leaning against the side of a work truck in a school parking lot, a chain-link fence behind him. Past the fence, out of focus, the lights of a baseball diamond and the small far shapes of girls in uniform. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking through the fence, at the field. "He just sat in the car," Catherine said softly. "For years. He just wanted to see you grow up. It was all she'd leave him." She turned the photograph over in my hands. On the back, in pencil, in his square hand, "Hannah, district game." She pitched 6 innings. "He kept a list," Catherine said, "in a notebook. Everything he could find out about you, however he could find it. When you graduated nursing school, he got hold of the program somehow and had it laminated." She wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. "There was one time he nearly broke. You were 19, working in the hospital cafeteria before you finished your degree. He drove down and sat in his truck in the lot for 3 hours, working up the nerve to walk in and just say hello. He didn't do it. He told me he'd rather love you from the parking lot than watch you flinch the way she'd taught you to." I had to put the photograph down for a moment. I had been 19 in that cafeteria. I had hated him that year. Hard. The way you hate someone to keep from missing them. "Why didn't you tell me?" I said. "Any of it. All those years." Catherine's face crumpled, then held. "Because she'd cut me off too, the second I tried. And Tom asked me not to. He said if it came from me you wouldn't believe it. You'd think I was taking sides in something old. He said the only way you'd ever believe it was if it came from him, with the records, after he was gone, when there was nothing left for him to gain by lying." She reached across the table and held my wrist. "He was right, wasn't he? You believe it now." I sat at my aunt's kitchen table, a box of my father's returned letters on one side of me and his photograph on the other, and I finally understood the true size of what had been taken. It wasn't the money. The money was $300,000, and it was the smallest part of the theft. They'd taken him. They'd taken 20 years of a father who never once stopped trying, and in his place, they'd handed me a stone and told me, every single day, that it was the truth. My mother started calling the day after the reading date went out. She'd gotten it from Reyes's office, the way every beneficiary had. The first calls were warm in a way that made the back of my neck prickle. The funeral voice, now over the phone. "Hannah, sweetheart, I've been thinking about you so much. This has been so hard on all of us. We shouldn't let money come between family. We're all we have left now." I let her talk. I'd learned something at my aunt's table that I hadn't known I needed. Silence is a thing you can hand a person, and then watch what they do with it. When Warm didn't get a response, she sharpened. You're being cold, Hannah. After everything I did for you. I gave up my whole life raising you girls, and this is my thanks? Your father turned you against me from inside his grave. A pause, calculating. That money belongs to this family. You know in your heart it does. I haven't said anything, Mom. You don't have to say it. I can hear it in how you're breathing. Ashley worked the other line. Texts, mostly. My sister has never once made a phone call she could turn into a colder text instead. Mom is falling apart. You're really going to do this to her? She's 61 and you're leaving her with nothing. Real classy, Hannah. Dad obviously wasn't in his right mind at the end and everyone knows it. Don't make us prove it in court. I read that last one 3 times. Don't make us prove it. As if proving it were a card they held and not the cliff they were about to step off. Then a 4th text, an hour later, that told me more than the other 3 combined. We talked to a lawyer. He says we have a strong case. This is your last chance to be reasonable before it gets ugly. I called Reyes. They've retained someone, I said. Ashley says they're going to contest. All of it. I assumed they would. Not a flicker of surprise. Has anyone said the word contest to you directly, in writing? Ashley just did. In a text. Good. Keep it. His voice slowed into the careful register I'd come to trust. Then let me be precise, Hannah, because this is the hinge the whole thing turns on. The moment they file a formal challenge to the will, they trigger the no contest clause. And given the documentation your father left, the capacity letter, the support record, the account statements, there is no probable cause for a challenge, which means, when it fails, and it will fail, they forfeit their bequests, $25,000 each. Gone. They will have sued their way out of the only thing he left them. I stood at my window with the phone against my ear. Should I warn them? I said. Tell them what they're walking into? There was a pause on the line, longer than his usual. That is a question of conscience, not law, Reyes said. Legally, you have no duty to talk an adult out of her own mistake. Your father anticipated this exact move. He built the clause for it. He could have left them more, and chose, very deliberately, to leave them just enough to lose. A beat. If they want to walk into it, the law lets them walk in. The decision about whether to hold the door is yours. I thought about a box of returned letters with return to sender pressed hard into the paper. I thought about a man who'd sat in a parking lot for years rather than make me flinch. Set the reading, I said. I'll be there. All of us in one room. There was one more thing, and I said it before I lost the nerve. When you read the will, don't lead with the account. Don't lead with any of it. I'd been thinking about this since my aunt's kitchen. Let my mother say her piece first. Let her get it on the record. That he abandoned us. That he never paid. All of it. Then read what he left. I don't want to win an argument. I want her own words sitting next to his checks. A silence. Then something I'd never heard from Reyes. A short, dry breath that was almost approval. Your father said the same thing, more or less. He said, don't argue with Diane, just let her talk, and then open the file. A pause. I'll ask your aunt to attend as well. She holds the correspondence. If anyone questions the letters, she can speak to where they came from. She'll come, I said. She's been waiting 20 years to. I didn't warn them. I want to be honest with you about that, because I've turned it over 100 times since, late at night, in the quiet. I could have picked up the phone and said, don't do this. You'll lose even the little he left you. I didn't. They were so certain they were owed everything. So certain I'd fold. The way the second-class daughter always folded. So certain that the truth was simply whatever my mother decided to say out loud, the way it had been my entire life. I decided for once to let her say it out loud, in a room, with a court reporter's pen moving. On the record. My mother called once more the week before the reading and asked me to come to the house. A family conversation, she said, before the lawyers turn it ugly. Just us. The way it should be. I went. I want you to know I went calm. Not the old calm. Not the folding, flinching calm I'd worn my whole life. This was the other kind. The kind I have in a trauma bay when a man is bleeding out and panic would kill him. Clear. Cold. Useful. I had spent 2 weeks with the file and the box. The calm I carried into that house was the calm of a person who already knows the ending and is only there to watch the others find out. The house I grew up in. Same furniture. Same wall of photographs. Ashley's pageants. Ashley's wedding. Ashley's 2 children on a beach. One small frame of me near the back hall. My nursing school graduation. The spot where guests don't look. My mother and Ashley were waiting in the living room, arranged like a panel. Ashley's husband, Paul, hovered in the kitchen doorway with a beer he wasn't drinking. "Sit down, Hannah," my mother said. I sat. She'd prepared. She had her version loaded and ready, and she recited it as fact, the way she'd recited my father's abandonment for 20 years until it became the air I breathed. "Your father and I had an understanding," she began. "When we divorced, I gave up my career to raise you girls. He agreed the assets were really for the family, all of it, in the end. That money he set aside was always meant to be shared. He'd want it shared now. He just didn't write it down clearly because by the end he was sick and confused." "Which money?" I said. "The estate, the accounts, all of it." "No," I said. "Not the estate, the account, the one with my name on it, my college fund." I kept my voice flat and even. "Where did it go?" The room changed temperature. My mother's face did the flicker. That half-second of arithmetic before the mask reset. Ashley sat up straighter. "I told you years ago," my mother said. "There was never much in there. It went to the household, to raising you, to raising me." I let the words sit a moment. I bagged groceries for my own school clothes. I borrowed $31,000 to become a nurse. "So where did it go, Mom? Be specific." "Don't you dare." Her voice climbed a register. "Don't you sit in my living room and interrogate me like one of your patients, after everything I sacrificed for you. It's a simple question." Ashley jumped in, right on cue, the way she always did the moment our mother started to crack. "God, Hannah, you're unbelievable. Dad's been in the ground 3 weeks and you're playing forensic accountant. There was no secret account. You think Mom stole from her own kid? You always do this. You've always got to be the victim, the martyr. Poor little second-class Hannah." There it was. Out of her own mouth. Second class. "Funny thing," I said, still level, turning to my sister now. "When we were teenagers, did Dad ever send you money? Directly? A gift, maybe? 16? 17? Ashley's face did something quick and guilty before her mouth caught up. "What? No, I don't. Why would he? He didn't send either of us anything." "You're sure?" I said, "No, Hannah. Ashley." My mother's voice came down like a hand on the back of a neck. Low. Warning. "She's fishing. Don't answer her." But I'd seen it. The flinch. And so had Paul, in the doorway, who'd stopped pretending to drink his beer and was watching his wife with a small new frown. Ashley knew something. Maybe not all of it. But she knew the shape of a gift from Dad that her mother had told her to keep quiet about, and 20 years later her own face had just told me so. I let it go. I didn't need her to confess in this room. I only needed to know it was there, waiting, for the room that mattered. "You're imagining things," my mother said, recovering, smoothing her skirt. "This is exactly what I mean. You build these little theories, these stories where you're the one who was wronged. It's not healthy, Hannah. It's honestly a little paranoid. Your father did the same thing. Saw conspiracies everywhere by the end. Maybe it runs in that side." That was the move. I'd grown up under that move and never had a name for it until I was an adult sitting in a trauma bay listening to a frightened man insist he was fine. Take the true thing the other person sees and hand it back to them as their sickness. She'd done it my whole childhood. She was doing it now, in real time, and I watched her do it the way you watch a familiar weather front roll in. I almost did it then. I had copies of the certified statements in my bag, folded, on top of my keys. I could have laid them across the coffee table, the deposits, the withdrawals, the 2 transfers with Ashley's own name on the memo line, and watched both their faces come apart in real time. I didn't, because I understood sitting in that room that the documents would do far more work in front of witnesses than they ever would here. Here, my mother could scream and deny and call me a liar, and there'd be no one left to remember it but the 3 of us and a son-in-law staring into his beer. So I let them commit. I let them say it out loud, all the way, with no records in front of them to make them careful. So, there was no account, I said quietly. You're both telling me that. Nothing was set aside, nothing was taken. I just misunderstood. For 20 years. Yes, my mother spat it. Finally, you misunderstood. Like you misunderstand everything, Hannah. You always twist things to make yourself the wounded one. And you'll say exactly that, I said. At the reading, in front of his lawyer, on the record. I'll say the truth. She lifted her chin. I'll say your father wasn't in his right mind. I'll say that money belongs to this family and you're a cold, ungrateful girl who's letting it turn her against her own mother. I'll say it to the lawyer, to the cousins, to anyone in that room who will listen. She leaned forward. We've already retained an attorney, Hannah. We're contesting the will. Every line of it. So this is your last chance. Be reasonable now, or we do it the hard way. I stood. I picked up my bag. The statement still folded inside it, untouched. I'd never even opened it. Okay, I said. Then I'll see you at the reading. My mother blinked. She'd braced for a fight. For tears. For the old collapse. For the daughter who always, eventually, gave her $90 toward someone else's dress. She got a closed door instead. And for the first time in 34 years, I watched my mother look at me and not know what I was going to do. Hannah, she said as I reached the front hall, don't do anything you'll regret. I stopped at the wall of Ashley's photographs and the one small frame of me near the back, where the light didn't reach. I won't, I said. And I walked out into the dark and let the door close behind me, and I did not look back. And my hands were perfectly steady all the way to the car. The reading was in the conference room at Reyes and Holloway. 11 of us, by my count. My mother and Ashley, side by side at the long table. Paul, Ashley's husband. 2 cousins I barely knew, there because my mother had spent the week telling the family she was being robbed. My Aunt Catherine, who came in quietly and sat near me, a worn manila envelope in her lap. 2 men in clean work jackets, Frank and a man named Davis, my father's operations managers for over 20 years, named in the will not to receive anything but, my father had insisted, to witness his wishes for the company. David Reyes at the head of the table, his paralegal beside him, a court reporter's steno machine open and ready. On the record. The phrase kept circling in me. There would be a record this time. There would be a witness who wasn't just the 3 of us in a kitchen. Reyes opened a folder. Before I read the will, he said, I understand there's an intention to contest. So for the record, Mrs. Gaither, is it your position that Thomas Gaither lacked capacity when this will was executed, and that the estate should be divided differently? My mother sat up, composed, the grieving widow restored. This was the part she'd rehearsed her whole life. It is, she said. My husband always meant to provide for his family equally. He never once abandoned his obligations to either of his daughters. He was a generous man who'd want everything shared fairly among us. This will doesn't reflect the man I knew. By the end, he was sick and confused, and someone clearly took advantage of that. There it was. The lie, spoken into the steno machine, word for word. Never abandoned his obligations. Everything shared fairly, the whole 20-year architecture, on the record at last. Thank you, Reyes said, even as Stillwater. Noted. He didn't argue. He turned a page. Then let me put a few matters on the record as well. First, the will itself. Executed this spring. Witnessed. Accompanied by a letter from Mr. Geither's treating physician confirming full testamentary capacity at the time of signing. He read the terms aloud. The estate to me. $25,000 each to Diane and to Ashley. Then the no contest clause, read slowly, in full, every word. My mother's face stayed smooth. She thought the clause was a formality. She thought she was about to win. Second, Reyes said, since the question of Mr. Geither's obligations to his daughters has been raised, these are his child support payments. He laid the canceled checks out along the table in a long row. Every month, 13 years, paid in full, cleared. There is not one missed payment in this record. The room shifted. The cousins leaned in. Frank and Davis traded a look. That's not relevant, my mother said. The denial, right on schedule. Child support was 30 years ago. We're here about the estate. You raised his obligations, Reyes said. I'm documenting them. He laid out the next stack. This is a custodial account Mr. Geither funded for Hannah's education from the time she was 5 years old. These are his deposits. He set them down year by year, then the other column. And these are the withdrawals, transfers, specifically, out of Hannah's account, into a personal account belonging to Diane Geither. Totaling, with growth, just over $300,000. The room went very quiet. That's a lie, my mother said, sharp now, the smoothness gone. That was household money. I had every right to it. It was a custodial account in your minor daughter's name, held by you in trust for her, Reyes said. He set down 2 more pages. And these 2 transfers went not to your account, but to one belonging to Ashley Gaither Pruitt, when Hannah was 16 and 17. Every head turned to Ashley. I didn't know where it came from, Ashley said too fast. Mom said it was a gift. She said Dad sent it for me. She stopped, heard herself, saw Paul's face, but it was already in the air, already in the steno machine. Mom said it was a gift. The exact thing she'd sworn 3 weeks ago in that living room had never happened. Then, the final reveal. Reyes nodded to my aunt. Catherine's hands shook as she opened the manila envelope and laid out 3 things. A returned letter, my name on the front, return to sender pressed deep into the paper in my mother's hand. The photograph, my father against the truck, watching a baseball field through a fence, and my father's letter, 3 pages, blue ink. Reyes didn't read the whole thing. He read 3 lines into the record. You were never second to me. Not once. I came to your games. I sat in the parking lot because I wasn't allowed inside. I never missed a payment. Not one. Silence. The deep kind, with weight in it. The court reporter's hands rested. One of the cousins had a hand over her mouth. Frank was staring at the table like it had said something to him. And then my mother lost control. They always do it themselves. I never had to say a single word. She was on her feet. Fine, fine. You want the truth? I earned that money. I raised those girls while he played businessman across town. I gave up everything. My career, my prime, my whole life. And I deserved every cent of that account for what I put up with from him. It was mine. As far as I'm concerned, it was always mine. She jabbed a finger down at the letter on the table. And he does not get to crawl out of the grave and make me the villain. I made him the villain. Somebody had to. It was the only thing that held this family together. You could hear the building's air handler. Nothing else. Ashley tried her own version, white to the lips. I deserved my share too. I'm his daughter just as much as she is. Why does she get all of it? She always gets to be the good one in the end. She caught it. Too late. It was already down. Reyes let it settle. Then quietly, the consequences. For the record, he said, Mrs. Gaither and Mrs. Gaither Pruitt have each now stated an intention to contest this will. As the will contains a valid no contest clause, and as no probable cause for a contest exists in light of this documentation, any formal challenge will result in the forfeiture of their respective bequests in full. He closed the folder. I'd strongly advise you both to speak with your own attorney before you file anything. He'll tell you exactly what I've just told you. You'll be giving up the $25,000 each, and you will lose. If you've ever been the one they called difficult for finally telling the truth, the cold one, the selfish one, the one who wouldn't keep the peace at her own expense anymore, I want to hear from you. What did it cost you to stop folding? And was it worth it? They filed anyway. I think my mother simply couldn't stop herself. She'd built an entire life on being owed, and a woman like that can't hear "you'll lose" as anything but a dare. Their lawyer withdrew within the month, once he'd actually read the file. The contest failed before it reached a hearing. They forfeited the bequests. They sued their way out of the only thing my father left them, exactly the way he'd designed it, sitting in that lawyer's office in the spring, dying, thinking of me. I never spoke to either of them again, not out of revenge, out of clarity. You don't keep handing your warmth to people who spent 20 years selling you a lie and emptying an account with your name on it. That isn't bitterness. It's just, finally, taking the bigger chair. The one I'd been told my whole life was never meant for me. I kept the company. The first thing I did was sit down with Frank and Davis and tell them no one was losing their job. 90 families. My father trusted me with them, and he was right to. I'm still learning the business. I'm bad at parts of it. The men and women who worked beside him for 30 years are teaching me, patient about it, because they loved him, and because I have his hands and his habit of going quiet before I decide a thing. I paid off my nursing school loans in a single afternoon and felt almost nothing, which surprised me. The number that had looked like a phone number at 18 was gone in the time it took to sign a page. Then I set up a fund in his name. A scholarship for kids working their way through nursing school while holding down a job, the way I had. The first recipient bags groceries at a store I know well. I told the office to keep her name confidential. She doesn't need to be anyone's lesson. She just needs the help no one gave me. Oh, Aunt Catherine and I have dinner every Sunday now. She tells me stories, and I'm meeting my father in pieces, 20 years late, and somehow it turns out to be enough. I keep one thing on my desk at the company, his old nameplate. Thomas Gaither, brass, worn smooth at the corners from his thumb. I had a second line added underneath it. Hannah Gaither. Most mornings I get there before anyone else, while it's still dark, and I unlock the front door he built this whole place to be able to walk through. I think about a man in a truck across the street from a baseball field, watching his daughter through a chain-link fence, year after year, asking for nothing, just to see her grow up. He came to every game. I know that now. And I was never second to him. Not once. Not for a single day of my life.